Thank you, Yusek Epi. I guess, kung wala na ibang comments, let's proceed on the other provisions of Reso 101. Haba na rin meeting natin. We are now on letter B number 1. And right now, the general rule is that there is no mandatory testing, but the LGU was given the right to impose the testing as a requirement prior to travel. And that's what we discussed. Using the PCR test, no? This was upon the recommendation of Yusek Berhere. And here is very clear, no travelers shall be required to undergo quarantine unless may symptom. We're okay with that eh. Governors, may comment ba kayo dito? Although of course, dito ngayon sa letter B number 1, this is where the use of the antigen test may come in, Yusek Epi. There may be an amendment here, and the amendment will be that at the port of entry or point of entry, the LGU may decide to subject the traveler to an antigen test. Baka dito yung amendment lang, no? Yun lang, proposal. Kung wala na tayong ibang comments, Gobs, do you have any other comment on this? So we can go to the other provisions. Mukhang wala na eh. Klaro naman yata ito. We now go to letter C.
Governor?
Sige, si Sandy.
Tinanong ko po yan sa IATF Secretary Nograles, yung traveler. It also refers daw po to APORS kasi traveler siya.
Non-APORS. Sa non-APORS.
Non-APOR po yan.
Non-APOR. Sandy. Yeah, I asked him also. We will discuss this, Yusek Epi. As I said, this may be treated as a separate group. Kasi nga yung concern sila GovDoc. Medyo valid eh. Iba yung situation eh, no? Can we just finish this and then we discuss kung if we may have to apply the same rule for travelers to non-APORs, no? Using the land travel, no? Pwede ba yun, Yusek Epi?
Apo.
Sino muna tayo?
Nag-aalala ko po yung land travel na magkaroon ng separate protocol. Again, we don't need to go to the IATF as long as it's not violative of the resolution and existing omnibus guidelines.
Yes. So, nung number 1, on letter C, wala namang issue na rito. We agreed to this, no? Yusek Epi, no? No more travel authority and no more health certificates, no?
Di na po maging issue.
We agreed to that. We know that yes. Although merong mga comments on the health certificate, but we will discuss that in the non-APORs, no? Yung number 2, ito yung isang issue. I made the recommendation, but I was not there anymore during the meeting where this was taken up. We recommended, kasi the problem here is there are people who complain, no? That for APORs, they're just allowed to enter without any testing. And they are not subjected to 14-day quarantine. But we understand the reason because they are government officials who are tasked to perform certain functions. If you put them under quarantine, how can they do the job, no? I agree with this. Kaya lang just to prevent the criticism that there's double standard here, no? While the many people from the province, the host province, are put under quarantine 14 days, the government officials and employees are allowed to just enter without any testing and without being placed under quarantine. The recommendation here is if we can require the government officials to just get the PCR test before arrival, no? Ngayon, yung quarantine, that's okay. We will not put them under quarantine. But, some are saying some of these government officials may be positive. They were not even tested. Recommendation here is that they be required to get the PCR test and get the result prior to entry. So it's a requirement prior to travel to the LGU of destination. Dito naman sa ID, okay yan with us. Travel order, okay yan. Yung travel itinerary lang, we recommend that in the travel itinerary, it will show the specific period of time within which a particular activity will be performed. Okay? And that after these official functions, they should stay put in the hotel or the place where they stay in the province. Alam mo, what we're trying to address here is the criticism of the hundreds or thousands of our constituents were placed under quarantine. Why is there double standard? Just because they are government officials that they should not be put on quarantine. So that's why, as a middle ground, we recommended that these government officials stay in the hotel. Parang is a sort of the self-quarantine na lang. Di ba? Para wala lang masabi yung constituents namin.
Governor,
Yes.
si Joseph has another meeting lang po daw.
Sige. Then we will finish. There is no other. Si Yusek Berhere.
Yes, sir. Just permission to leave.
Okay. Thank you po, Yusek. Thank you po.
Provide relevant. Ibigay po namin lahat ng issuances na kailangan kay Yusek Epi para po mabuo yung pag-uusap agreements niyo po dito.
Sige po, maraming salamat. And we hope to see you again and invite you to one of our meetings. Thank you po. Keep safe.
Bye-bye po.
Salamat. For the short meeting. Thank you, Yusek.
Later, there are no comments. Wala namang problem dito eh. Itong S-Pass, I think there is no problem here. Meron ba magkukomment dito?
Governor, may mga
ginagawa na to eh. Yeah.
May mga comments po kasi yung ating point persons.
Sige, mamaya we will handle that, no? Tapusin lang natin to kasi palagay ko wala nang controversial dito. So we can go to the travel requirements of the travelers using the land trip, ha? Mamaya muna, isa lang natin sabay-sabay yung mga comment, no? Why don't we finish this first, no? Yung letter D, S-Pass. Do you hear me? Is there any objection here? I think there's no objection here, no? Sige, let's go to letter E. Letter E. Scroll up mo. Sandy. There. Letter E, the other one. Wala namang problem siguro dito. Do you use the stay safe, no? Yusek Epi. Is there any problem here? Any issues? None. Okay. Letter E. Wala naman ito. I think Yusek Epi, the terminals will now provide the quarantine and isolation facilities.
Yes, ilan po?
By CAAP, in the seaports by PPA. Tama ba yan?
Tama po yan.
Okay. Sabi pa nila rito, all ports referral system who become symptomatic. Ang ngayon, instead of the local government unit, parang yung Bureau of Quarantine na ngayon na mag-handle dito sa mga symptomatic. Tama ho ba yun, Yusek Epi?
For international travelers and airports, sila po. Tapos sa local naman, pwedeng si local health official may take over.
Baka siguro iklaro ho natin ulit ito para hindi ho naguguluhan yung LGU. Kasi parang ang nangyari ho, sagot na ng Bureau of Quarantine lahat. Natuwan-tuwa na ho kami. Baka we can have...
sa local lang po, pagdating sa local, take over din naman kayo.
Okay. Or local.
So pag dumating na sa LG of destination, pag merong naging symptomatic doon, take over si local health officials. Inside
the territory already.
Opo. Yun lang naman niya po.
Okay. Integrated Terminal Exchange sa NCR. Ito, taga-NCR lang ang involved dito. No bus company or public transport shall be allowed use of the private terminals. Plansyado na ba ito, Yusek Epi?
Plansyado natin, Gob. We're centralizing the travel from NCR to the 5 integrated terminal exchange para may control sa tao. Lahat na ma-check.
Wala naman tayong problema dyan. Ito daw, yung sa number 4, wala namang problema. May lang to
Opo, option lang po yan.
Wala tayong problema. Itong last paragraph na yata ito. This uniform travel protocols, wala na to, no? Tapos na tayo. Yusek Epi?
Itong provision na to, importante. Ito yung gagawin natin that we don't have to go back to IATF.
Ayun.
Gawa ho tayo dito as long as it's consistent with the resolution, pwede tayong gumawa ng additional ano.
Ayan, okay. So we're done. We will now discuss yung land travelers, yung the ones who are not using the airports and seaports. And that's the concern of GovDocs, no? Is saying yung triaging, medyo very impractical and very costly. So, anong proposal nyo? GovDocs, baka may proposal kito. How do you, what are the measures? So, we can ensure at least that not many infected persons enter LGU of destination. May proposal ba kayo dito? GovDocs? Sige. Sige, si Yossi Kepi muna. Sige, Yossi Kepi.
Ang sa akin lang naman, okay naman yung plano ni GovDocs, no? What is important is the messaging to the traveler na hindi na sila nahirapan kasi sila sa travel authority from PNP tsaka yung health certificate. Doon talaga silang kumbaga prevents them from moving, no? So yung balak ni GovDocs on the part of Quirino, pwede ho natin gawin yan. And again, the requirement for clinical testing upon entry is not limited to medical doctors. Pwede nga po yung ating other health professionals like midwives and nurses to do the clinical testing. Anyway, gagawa naman po si Sec Vergere ng kung ano tong clinical testing, what does it involve. Ang tinitingnan ko baka pwedeng kasi doon sa ating omnibus guidelines po, pag inter-zonal travel, as long as the same community quarantine classification, MGCQ to MGCQ, travelers can move, no? Even non-APORs for that matter, subject to reasonable regulations, if any, of the local government unit. So kung wala pong regulations on the travel, kagaya po ng Tagaytay, nung lumabas po yung provision na yan, everybody went to Tagaytay kasi wala silang quote-unquote reasonable regulation to go to Tagaytay. So, but if the LGU will require some reasonable regulation, it has to go to the DLG for us to assess whether it's reasonable or not. Otherwise, kung intra-zonal travel or interzonal travel with the same community quarantine classification, doon ho magkakaroon that should be that should more or less light in terms of movement of people. Yun lang po, Gov. I'm just stating the omnibus guidelines provision.
Yusek,
actually, sige, GovDocs, go ahead.
Kayo na po muna, sir. Kayo na po muna.
Hindi, ikaw muna. Ikaw yung involved. Nasa lugar mo yun eh. Sige, go ahead. GovDocs.
Okay. So Yusek, pasensyahan nyo na po ako dahil medyo mag-a-adjust kami at a difficult time where our cases are higher than usual. So we're at 34 active today, which is more than our total 2020 number of cases. So kaya naghihigpit kami. We're trying to control. But it comes at a time when I can no longer require travel documents. Wala akong issue, Yusek, dun sa travel authority ng PNP. It's of no use to me. Ang alternative kasi sa akin, kung hindi kami magme-medical certificate, which a person who wants to travel to Quirino can do at his own convenience, basta lang it's valid for the last 2 days, or whatever the LGU may require. Baka sa amin 2 days, 3 days tinatanggap pa namin yan. So, kasi ang triaging will mean that in our borders, 7 borders, we'll have to have 7 teams. And we have to have 2 to 3 shifts per team. So hindi talaga, in our experience, hindi talaga sustainable sa land travel yung triaging. So that leaves me, kung wala na yung medical certificate, which the person traveling can do at his own convenient time, presuming, of course, that it is really valid and an actual medical examination was conducted by a valid health practitioner, ang may iwan na sa akin is testing. I will have to require testing now. Kundi, wala na akong checkpoint. Useless na. Yun ang nagiging issue for me right now using EPI. I will now require them to submit to me a test result before they enter my province. Kasi wala na akong ibang tool. And then, that will... before, I did not require, I only required a medical certificate that we could validate if we wish to call the person who issued the medical certificate.
Can I suggestion lang, Gov? Kasi dun sa ating SPAS, it will issue a travel coordination permit, no? Which will come from the LGU. What if we can require the traveler at least to your province, because if you so require, kasi dependent ito ng yung reasonable regulation, no? So specifically for Quirino, you may want na all those going to your province mag-submit. I don't know, pwede yata ito i-submit online. Tatanungin ko sa DOST kung kaya, no? Yung a copy of their medical certification na lang of a doctor, not necessarily the local health official. Tapos that will be the basis of your issuance of a a travel coordination permit, at least for the province of Quirino. Yung po kaya, pwede ho yun?
Actually, I'm open to that, Yusek Epi. I'm just, ayoko naman, I'm not trying to create a special policy for Quirino.
Hindi po. Kasi dun sa SPAS po, merong unrestricted and restricted. Pag unrestricted ho yung LGU, wala na siyang gagawin. So, tupunta na lang talaga doon without any restriction. Pag restricted, ibig sabihin meron siyang what we call quote-unquote reasonable regulation. So it will mention to the traveler na for this specific LGU, meron siyang extra restriction. One is requirement of RT-PCR. The other one is kung gusto niyo sa province naman ninyo is a doctor certificate, public or private practitioner. So yun ang tinatawag nating restriction. Pag unrestricted, wala nang ganon, wala ring RT-PCR, pwede na dumiretso yung traveler. Now, para siya makagawa nun, issuehan ngayon siya ng travel coordination permit. So that may be one of your requirements to issue to a traveler to your province. So pwede kung sa inyo po.
Okay yun sa akin, Yusek Epi, lalo na kung I don't even mind na it can be an alternative. Either a medical certificate from a doctor or his own physician, or a test result na recently taken. Okay sa akin both naman eh. Hindi naman kailangan two documents. One, compliance on one document will be enough, I think.
For your information, for all the governor's information, starting tomorrow, the DOST will now coordinate with our regional DILGs for them to distribute the SPAS protocols to the various local government units. Naka-default po yun na unrestricted lahat. So if you want to restrict travel by imposing certain requirements, such as yung medical health certificate from a doctor, or gusto niya mag-require talaga ng RT-PCR, ilagay niyo na po doon para malagay ko sa restricted list. Yun po.
Governor, I also invited DOST Director Rowan Gelonga. He's also in the Zoom meeting. If you have questions on SPAS.
Okay. Governor, somebody from DOST will explain the SPAS. Do you want a quick, short explanation, or do you have just any question? Lagay ko yung SPAS naman is okay yata eh. Any comment?
Importante ko alam niyo kung sino papasok sa lugar po ninyo. Malalaman po ninyo kung sino-sino sila.
Dito
Even a force.
GovDocs.
Salamat lang ako kay Yusek Epi for the accommodation na pwede pa rin ang LGU na for Quirino at least, and the others who might want to do that special reasonable requirement. Pwede pa rin namin ilagay doon. Tama ba yun?
Tama po yan.
Certificate from their own physician is acceptable.
Apo.
Okay sa akin yun, I think that's okay. Then last na lang, Yusek Epi, Gov. Presby, yung tanong ko lang sa DOST, pagka ba walang internet yung aming checkpoint, gagana ba? At kung sakaling may signal, sino pong magbabayad ng internet noon? At paano po kaya mangyayari yon? Kung pwedeng pasagot yung DOST.
Director Rowan.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Yeah, we recognize Director Rowan.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, governors. So bali yung espas kasi ng DOST, response lang to kung whatever yung mapag-usapan sa level ng IATF, particularly yung discussions ng governors, mayors, with the DILG also. Anyway, as mentioned by USEC FP earlier, we also had a short meeting to level off kasi nabanggit yung espas. So ito naman pwedeng gamitin ng mga LGUs natin. So, yung original kasi na pag-develop ng system, parang nilipat lang natin yung authority to issue travel authority from the Joint Sports COVID Shield to the LGUs. But sabi nga ni USEC FP kanina, nag-usap kami, sabi niya, wala na tayong travel authority. Bigyan na lang natin ng authority ng discretion yung mga LGUs to declare yung kanilang locality whether restricted siya or unrestricted. Pag unrestricted, wala na masyadong conditions, no? Pwede yung traveler mag-cap up na parang tinatawag na travel pass-through permit ng ang ipapakita lang na may travel siya sa ganitong locality. However, if the LGU declares itself to be on restricted travel mode, pwede tayo mag-generate ng tinatawag natin na travel coordination permit. Dito naman, pwede mag-impose ang LGU na prior to the issuance ng travel coordination permit, kailangan mag-RT-PCR siya. Or if in your case, sabi nyo nga, pwede namang ilagay doon ng LGU na kailangan ng medical certificate or whatever document. So, parang we transferred that discretion and leeway sa level ng ating mga local government unit. Yung problema lang sa espas is that just like any other online system, mukhang kailangan natin talaga ng internet connectivity. However, the system is robust enough na pwede ka mag-print out lang ng papel. So, hindi kailangan ng smartphone. Well, somebody will just have to assist you sa pag-print out ng either travel coordination permit or TPP. No? Yung problema na talaga yung you coordinate with the LGU kasi online siya. But during travel, sa mga checkpoints, for example, you have two options. Either may mobile phone ka, andun nakastore yung QR code mo, or the digital copy ng travel coordination permit, or before you travel, i-print out mo na lang sa papel. Kasi yung papel pwede mong ipakita yon sa nagmaman ng mga checkpoint. No? So,
or pwede rin screenshot, di ba, Director? Screenshot nila sa phone para hindi na kailangan ng connection sa border.
Yes, many options tayo, Ma'am Sandy. Pwedeng screenshot, i-store mo sa phone mo. Pwede mong i-print talaga sa papel para yung mga medyo nahihirapan sa mga digital na system. Hindi naman tayo
yung papel na yon, hindi po yun mababalidate ng checkpoint unless the checkpoint has internet. Tama po ba?
Yes, yung kaniyang validation, Doc, parang face value ng print out mo na document. But if you want a stronger validation,
exactly.
So,
Director, yan yung experience ko po talaga sa sa food pass. Yung DA, gumawa rin yan ng QR code. Ganyan din po talaga. Hindi po talaga na-check ng checkpoint yan unless through your help, through the ICT, mabigay naman kayo ng konting ayuda sa amin na magkaroon ng internet, kahit packet wifi, yung ating mga checkpoints. That will make them more effective.
Tama po. Sige po, Director Robin, sasabihin pa po kayo?
Medyo nasa labas na kasi ng function ng DOST yung magbigay ng internet.
Sige, okay. Anyway, sige. Ganito ho, USEC EPI, siguro may we request an amendment nitong letter C number 1 dito sa tinanggal nating travel authority and health certificate, nakalagay shall no longer be required. Because what was agreed upon and as is the practice in many LGUs, we we said there will be a focal person that will handle the entry of non-appors and appors to the province. And usually, the province issues a travel authority. And now we can call it the travel coordination permit. Ginagawa na ho namin yan so as to control. Gusto namin ilagay dito that the LGU will have the right to issue a travel coordination permit to those persons who intend to enter their territory for proper coordination and scheduling. Ganyan ho ito, it will support itong ESPAS kasi ho, ito naman, the applicants will connect or contact the focal person in charge of that, itong travel coordination permit doon sa provincial government. So they can do that even before. So ini-email na lang ho namin yung ganyan, travel authority or travel coordination permit, dala-dala na ho nila itong papel bago pumasok. That is what we're doing here sa Marinduque. So kahit may ESPAS, kung may problema naman sa internet, that will be no problem to us kasi dala-dala na ho nila yung travel coordination permit. Kung maaga pa naman ho silang kukuha niyan, they'll be able to get that kasi email lang naman ho doon sa kanilang email address Kung hindi wala ho silang email address, kahit sa kaibigan ho nila, papapadala ho natin yon. And that is what we're doing sa LPP ho na there is a focal person who handles yung entry of persons or travelers sa teritoryo niya. Hindi na unreasonably withheld ho yun, lalo na ngayon, maluwag na ho yung ating restrictions. This will also solve the problem for areas na wala hong internet, or particularly sa borders. Pagdating ho, dapat dala nila ho yun. Di ho ba? O ayun, baka ho yung isang solusyon na USIC EPI.
Okay na po tayo doon, Gov. RD Rowan, gusto talaga ng yung focal person natin nasa province. Paano bang reporting? Kasi po, Gov, ang sa ESPAS, it will give it to the municipalities and cities. Then, kaya nga po, paano to makaka-adjust ba, makaka-adjust ba, RD Rowan?
USIC EPI, ganito yan. Tingin ko, USIC EPI, kung province sakop niya na lahat yung munisipyo at saka yung component cities. Bahala na, iba po yung focal person ng ng highly urbanized cities saka yung independent component cities. Kasi yun na pagkarian ho namin sa liga yung focal person talaga ng probinsya mag-handle. Kasi kami yung may border control The moment we give that power or relinquish it to the municipal governments at saka maraming borders, kanya-kanya na hong yan. Baka hindi uniform rules. I suggest it should be the focal person of the provincial government that will handle it. Except for kahit doon sa highly urbanized, nasa loob din siya ng teritoryo ng probinsya Di ba? It's better that one person or office controls it.
So RD Rowan, can it be done?
Yes, USEC. Depending sa agreement ng LGUs, if instead of giving that control sa municipality level sa province, it's okay with us. It's easier for the system to be rolled out pag provincial level. We were just thinking na maybe the different municipalities would come up with their own conditions. But if this is something that is at the level of the province, mas madali ho natin gawin to.
Thank you, Director Rowan. Actually, 81 lang ang kausap nyo kaysa 1,460 municipalities, 146 cities. Lalo kayo magkakagulo-gulo. Ewan ko lang USIC EPI.
Yung highly urbanized cities po, Bob, hiwalay po.
Hindi, supposedly hiwalay. Pero nasa loob sila ng territory ng ng province. Baka mas magulo yun. Kung nasa loob yung highly urbanized city, kinontrol ng border ng provincial government, paano sila makakapasok? Anyway, dapat for this purpose, yung provincial government mag-handle ng entry, including yung sa HUCs at saka independent cities, component cities, ang tingin ko. Kasi yung border control, it belongs to the provincial government. Ako pwede natin ilagay yung USIC EPI dito sa letter C number 1. Tinanggalan natin yung travel authority from the police, from COVID shield. Baka pwede
na lang
yun.
ho natin, Gov, is I'll make an agreement with the HUCs and IACCs through their LCP. Kasi baka naman sila binigyan nyo kami ng focal person, tapos papaalam ko muna, baka papayag sila.
Okay, thank you po. Well,
I'll be
another
meeting with
point.
them tomorrow.
Very good. Another point po, Yusik Epi, no? Alam naman natin, talagang ang laki ng pinagbago nitong mga bagong rules natin. We are actually vulnerable dito sa mga carriers eh. Kaya naman yung isang recommendation namin, kung pwede natin ilagay dito, no? That the LGU can immediately impose a lockdown. No? Even without the approval of the LTF and the ATF, provided the LGU concerned notifies the RTF and the IATF. The reason for this is because we have to move right away because that is the primary concern of the LGU. No? If we wait for the approval of the RTF, that may take a few days.
No,
so
sir.
We must act swiftly.
You already have that right. For municipalities and component cities under you can really impose a lockdown. The role of the RIATF is simply to concur with your order, and that can be done within minutes or even hours. No? Kasi magpe-preside kagad yan sila. And you can even do it before the concurrence. So yung concurrence will come in later na.
Nakalagay po yun
Nakalagay po yun, Gov. It's in the Omnibus Guidelines. Medyo familiar po ako sa Omnibus Guidelines eh. Meron po akong pornographic memory, Gov. Photographic pala, photographic. Bisano ko yan. So you can impose, basta within your municipalities and component city, pwede nyo lockdown kagad kung kinakailangan.
Sir, paano?
Hindi, baka mas klaro ho. Yusik Epi, sa ESPA, hindi Yusik Epi, yun lang ho, baka mas magandang talagang immediately impose, notify. Wala na ho yung concurrence muna kasi it takes a few days eh.
No, what I'm saying is if you're going to lock down a municipality, you can lock it down immediately. Then you can get the concurrence later.
Pero nakalagay ho yan, may concurrence muna eh. Hindi ho ba?
Hindi po. Nakakapag-implementa kami dyan, maski sa NCR po. Meron kami nila lockdown doon na later na yung concurrence.
Ito ba ho, nakasama dito sa Section 7 ng Omnibus Guidelines?
Ito po,
numbers 4 and 5. Section 1 ng Section 7?
The IATF has the right to classify the community quarantine of local government units, except that the province, very specific kami sa province, can declare a specific municipality or sees in their area under lockdown or a different community quarantine subject to the concurrence. It can be done later na po.
Yun na ho yung kinaklaro namin, marami ho na si Shoko sabi ni Director Epi eh.
Ay,
hindi ba tanggalin na natin yung concurrence?
Wala ho na si Shokos kasi ako nag-i-issue ng Shokos eh.
Mabuti ho, kayo palagi nag-handle dyan.
Wala pa akong Shokos. Kasi alam ko yan.
Well, anyway, sige po, nandiyan naman pala kayo naniniwala ko kami sa inyo eh. Anyway, yung isa pa ho, yun naman kung can we state there that if circumstances require, the LGU naman can ask the NTF and the IATF for the approval of certain measures which may be only of use to their locality. Para kung katulad yung sinasabi ni DOST, i-require niya yung medical certificate. I think kung sa mga LGUs, let's give them the discretion. Kung ano yung recommendation nila, basta ho isubmit muna sa RTF, pwede naman yun. All these rules shall be without prejudice to the right of any local government to recommend other measures or systems regarding the infection or the COVID-19. Basta kanya-kanya na recommendation. Although may general rules tayo, we are at liberty to submit recommendations for the approval. Kanya-kanya na diskarte kahit ito yung ating IATF 101 o may lalabas pa tayo subsequent DILG. I think it should be made clear that if the circumstances in their respective territory necessitate that or require it, the LGU concerned can just recommend for the approval.
Tama po kayo, Gov. Actually, you're allowed to do that, Gov. In fact, as long as our rule, as long as it is aligned with existing IATF policies on the national public health emergency, wala ko tayong problema. Ang nangyayari lang, pag tinitingnan namin at merong conflict, then we talk to the governors. I think some of the governors here had conflicting executive orders with the IATF. Kinakausap naman po namin. In fact, maski yung kay Governor Garcia, that was referred to us if she violated, her executive order violated existing IATF omnibus guidelines. And we saw to it na wala naman siyang bina-violate. Pero nung nung nagpa-backriding siya nang walang sa likod na pinagbabawal, kinausap rin namin si Governor na bawal yan. At kinausap din namin siya nung hindi siya nag-face mask and face shield because that's not a good example to her constituency. So pag meron ng disalignment, kinakausap naman po namin even before we issue show cause orders, Gov. So you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to do that naman.
And then, so we just want to have it placed there that yun naman they don't have to implement it right away. Yun ang sinasabi ko What the LG will do, kung if certain measures are really needed in their place, it may even be not really in consonance with the rules of the IATF as long as they get first the approval of the NTF or the IATF. Di ba? Pwede naman mag-conflict pa nga yan But like Boracay, there was a special rule for Boracay, di ba?
Apo, kasi mayroon niyang separate interagency task force for Boracay. So yun lang exception to the rule.
Na-freeze po si Gov. Opo. Sige. Governor Velasco, nawala po signal nyo. Yusek, i-raise ko lang po, nag-text po sa akin si Governor Defensor and also Governor Bons Dolor. Even the focal persons po, ang request po nila, yung prospectivity ng effectivity ng 101, baka po pwede daw i-defer muna. Kasi ganito po ang sitwasyon, Yusek. Lumabas po yung 101, kaka-approve lang, tapos meron agad pronouncement si Secretary Roque sa public. So yung mga tao, pagdating po sa LGU, sasabihin nila, wala na raw ganito. Hindi pa ho nakahanda yung LGU. Hindi pa natin na-disseminate totally. Kahit po dito sa Congress, may mga taong, bakit i-require nyo kami antigen? Sabi ng Malacanang, wala nang, hindi na required. So, nagugulantang po yung mga establishments, lalo na po sa mga LGU na dadating yung mga tao, pagkatas hindi pa po sila handa dun sa, o hindi pa na-disseminate sa kanila officially yung 101, yung Resolution 101. So, ang suggestion po nila, Governor Defensor, sana either, sana naka-put in place na yung SPAS and also yung pong sa vaccination. Pero, ano lang naman po nila na maglalagay tayo sa resolution. This is effective on, for example, a certain date para po may time ang LGU makapag-prepare din. Kasi po, as a general rule, sa Article 2 ng Civil Code, effectivity takes place 15 days after the publication of the law or the guideline. But in this case, since bayanihan do effective upon publication, but in this case nga, ang request lang po ng mga governors is lagyan naman ng effectivity, kunyari March 1 ngayon, effective on March 15 or April 1 para po nakaka-prepare sila in advance. Hindi sila nagugulat na dadating na lang ang tao nagde-demand po na effective na agad yung resolution ng IATF. Yun po.
Well, yung sa travel documents, specifically yung getting health certificates tsaka travel authority. Travel authority, meron ng communication sa PNP na hindi na sila mag-i-issue ng travel authority. Sa local health certificate, most probably, documentations na yon, we can say that it can be effective. But so for all other rules, maybe we can do manual muna. Kagaya ng SPAS, manual lang muna tayo habang pinapamadali. Kasi ready na rin yung SPAS eh. Kaya nga i-roll out na bukas. Training na lang ang kailangan para sa focal persons. Pero at least yung 2 documents na yun that can be made effective immediately. Not actually immediately, but March 1 today. Kasi hindi na sila mag-i-issue ng health certificates for travel or travel authority. So yun muna ang yun lang ang magiging effective right away. All the rest we can do this manually, including the SPAS. But we have to be fast right away kasi ito yung IATF resolution.
Governor Velasco.
Thank you, Yusek Epi. I heard about that. Alam nyo, in relation to that, may question po isang governor. Sabi niya nga, baka daw pwedeng isuspend yung implementation ng 101. So we can level off with the NITF and our municipalities. Para actually, meron mga talagang questions as applicable na ba kaagad? Pwede nang pumasok agad, no? So yun yung effectivity date, medyo baka we can give them a few days palagi. So the LGUs can at least issue their own executive orders. Yun ang medyo nire-request yata, Yusek Epi.
Gov, actually itong opening up, last year pa ito eh. Hindi lang namin masyadong in-impose. This was the request of the Department of Tourism. Isa sila nag-sponsor ng provision eh. Yung omnibus yung section 7 ng omnibus guidelines. In fact, ako ang nagpalagay nung subject to reasonable regulations if any para mabigyan pa rin kayo ng leeway. Otherwise, the provision would have been simply allowing the non-appors to move as long as they are within they are of the same community quarantine status. Ako nagpalagay ng reasonable regulations, if any, para may say kayo. But we were not imposing it because the policy directive is still to protect the health status of every individual and the status of every Filipino. Pero nung nag-iba na po, itong February, nagkaroon po ng IATF meeting. Again, this was the sponsors were led by the economic team. Talagang they were very specific. One of the policy directives is there will no longer be an MECQ or ECQ, but all will now be granular lockdowns. In other words, per barangay, per street, or per building na lang ang lockdowns. And they even proposed to make MGCQ the whole country. Then one specific question that I asked them and was very clear is, yung nga, hindi na magde-declare ng MGCQ, ECQ, and the policy directive is really to slowly open the economy, including tourism, which again, I was mentioning, we've lost close to 2 trillion in GDP from tourism in 2020. So ako, ang tingin ko ho, mag-manual na lang ho tayo. Ang natutuwa lang naman ho yung tao, wala ng travel authority and pagkuha ng health certificate sa LGU. Doon silang tuwa. Pero ang anomaly po, I mean, I was reading the feedback from the netizens, ang anomaly is, hindi pa rin standard yan kasi si LGU, binigyan mo pa rin ng karapatang mag-impose ng testing. So, hindi na ho natin masagot yan. So, ako ang suggestion ko lang, let's go on with letting them in without the travel authority from the PNP and the health certificate. But let's subject them to some reasonable protocols. And kung pwede, gusto niyo talaga ng RT-PCR, mag-issue na ho kayo ng executive order. Anyway, you are now limited to the issuances to your EOs specifically if you want test before travel. Yung antigen, gagawan ko ito ng provision. Mukhang magkaya naman po ito. Tapos yung KGov DAX, he can issue temporarily ang executive order requiring a medical certificate, not necessarily from the local, pwedeng from the private doctors. Kasi naiinis po yung mga travelers natin na pumipila sila dun sa LGU of origin, nahihirapan sila. But I think pwedeng gawin yan manual muna
Yes,
kay
okay.
GovDax na basta may dalang health certificate from a licensed doctor. Pwede na yun. Yun po ang aking mga
GovDax.
suggestions. Opo.
GovDax, okay ka na? Okay,
Yes, sir.
okay. Pero siguro ho, Yusik Epi, bigyan nyo na rin ng written approval yung ginagawa ni Dax para meron ho siyang basis whatsoever. Kasi baka ma-question din siya ng ibang konsumensa. Isa lang point Yusik Epi, no?
GovDax, once you issue the EO, have it announced, pahingi ko ng kopya, tutulungan ko kayo mag-disseminate that in the province of Quirino, the reasonable regulation is for the traveler to bring a medical certificate from a licensed doctor. So hindi na pwede na silang hindi kumuha sa LG of origin. Doon sila nahihirapan kasi pila-pila daw.
Sige, Yusek. Ang gawin ko po, magpaalam na lang po muna ako by letter sa inyo that we will impose for a limited period. Ganun na lang po.
Opo. And I'll help you make the announcement.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yusik Epi, thank you, Dax. Yusik Epi, isang clarification lang, no? Itong Reso 98A, February 4, 2021, dito sa mga government officials, nakalagay dito, C, symptoms screening at deport upon arrival in case of public transport upon boarding. Ang question ho dito ito ba ay pag may nakitang symptoms, pwede na lang i-reject ng LGU? Pwede na lang hindi papasukin kesa accept pa namin.
Ayaw i-quarantine.
Ayaw naman ho nila mag-quarantine, di ho ba?
Kung may symptoms, yes, you can reject a gov. I think meron kaming ganung usapan ni Governor JJ at one time. Sabi ko, kung may symptoms, huwag niyo papasukin.
O yun ho, ganun na lang. Kasi cargo pa namin yan di ho ba?
Sige po.
Baka may clarificatory, baka ilagay nyo na rin ho sa rules kasi we have to protect ourselves, di ho ba?
Sige po,
O si JJ, magsasalita si JJ.
Thank you, sir. Tek, magtanong ako ba? Balik nga tayo dito bago sa 98A, yung documentary requirements doon po sa APOR. May nakalagay dito and must pass symptom screening. Pwede natin apply dito yung antigen na lang para sigurado ba kay nakapasok na tapos palisin mo.
Nabanggit, I'm already considering a provision for this antigen testing.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Tapos second, our APORs who are not national government personnel on official business also subject to RT-PCR or antigen lang tayo, sir?
Ang importante lang naman sa kanila, hindi sila gagastos.
Oo nga. Hindi Oo. Tapos, second, hindi, magbabayad naman sila, gusto sila magbayad.
Okay lang.
Okay naman wala naman problema. Binibigyan din natin ng discount. Ganon. And second, last, no? I-clarify mo nga yung back riding. Yung back riding, pwede po yun. Yung back riding, pwede basta may pwede. Yung abal-abal?
Yes, sir. Pwede po. Basta meron lang over sa likod.
Yung sa likod. Pwede tayo.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sige. Yun lang, Sek. Klaro na. Thank you ako.
Thank you, Gov JJ. Yusik Epi, we go back to... thank you, Gov JJ. Yusik Epi, let us be clarified on that. Can you issue that rule that the LGU can ask the traveler to pay for the cost of the antigen test kit?
Basta na yung back riding. Pag wala kayo back
and
riding.
also the PCR test, can we have a rule on that? Kasi as far as I remember, parang hindi kami pwedeng mag-charge yan.
Yung test before travel po, Gov, sila talaga yan, si traveler.
Ayan, there's no question. Yung at the port of entry or the point of entry, can we subject them to PCR test or antigen?
Gov, magkano yung antigen sa
Well, Ang government price is something like 750 or 800 lang eh. And then you get the
I-disclose na
results
lang
in 10
natin.
minutes.
I-disclose na lang po natin once na maayos natin yung provision that para alam ng traveler na pag darating ako sa LGU na ito, meron silang antigen testing which will cost me additional X amount. At tapos pag nag-positive ako, mag-RT-PCR, ako rin sasagot at this amount. So let's be specific na lang per province basis.
Tama ko yun. Sa amin no, yung Sangguniang Bayan, panlalawigan, nag-issue ho ng resolution on the price Kanya-kanya na ho yun siguro.
Sige po.
Ngayon ho, ang problema ho namin dito, yung si Kepi, yung mga indigent, yun na mahihirap. So sa amin, dahil ganun, ay politika rin yan, so we may opt to shoulder yung antigen test ng mga indigent. So provided they present a certificate, yun ang aming tulong na lang. But for those who can, as a general rule, we will require them to pay as a general rule para hindi naman ho kami maubusan ng pera.
Opo, ganun lang gagawin ko.
Oo.
Pag indigents, kailangan magdala silang certificate.
Opo, meron yan mga yan. Binibigyan ng barangay ho yan
Opo, sige po.
Anyway, mukhang okay na ho yung ayaw mo ko yung mga ibang governors. Sandy, yung mga comment dyan.
La Union po, from La Union, sabi the province of La Union already has a draft EO for release, supposedly today. Shall we wait for the amendments of the DILG? When will it be available? Our constituents are already following up.
Wala namang amendments, it's still the same. We're just
yung mga
putting in
clarificatory, lang po ninyo.
We're just putting in additional provisions that is still aligned with the resolution. So,
yes po. Yung concern po ni Governor Dolor tsaka ni Governor Defensor.
Teka, sandali Sandy. Nandito si Governor Defensor may tatanong na.
Pwede magtanong.
You recognize Padre. Go ahead.
Magandang hapon, President, Presby, and Yusek June. Yung concern din ng Iloilo, yung immediate na implementation ng Resolution 101 na mas mabuti, yun nga yung position namin, mas mabuti sana kung may transition ba na halimbawa effective siya like March 15 or 18 para ma-plan siya namin yung mga protocols na pwede naming ipatupad. Halimbawa, dito sa Resolution 101, may option ang pro-LGU kung mag-require ka ng RT-PCR. No? In the case of the province of Iloilo, we already have that requirement in our Executive Order 183 since the start of the MGCQ or even earlier. But we were discouraged from the implementation of that requirement and we followed. That is why even nandyan yan sa EO namin, hindi yan ini-implement ng mga shipping lines tsaka ng mga airlines namin. And because of that, naobliga rin ang mga mayors namin na mag-quarantine. Of course, so that they can have a higher level of security kung walang RT-PCR ang pumapasok. Humingi kami ng RT-PCR kasi if we open up travel, especially simultaneously na walang test, the terminals and the ports will become crowded. And the ports, the terminals, the airplanes, the vessels, and the buses will become a big event of transmission. Pero yun nga, kung may immediate implementation tayo, can we advise the airlines and the shipping lines not to accept passengers without the RT-PCR? At kung gagawin namin yan, maraming makakancel muna na flights at mga trips. So, magulo siya. No? And kung hindi naman namin gagawin yan, yung mga dumadating dito na returning residents namin, hindi mo na siya pwedeng i-quarantine. So, yung isang problema sa walang quarantine, yung acceptance namin sa barangay level, medyo challenge pa rin sa amin. Especially when the barangay folks know na wala itong negative RT-PCR result. No? So, nagkakaroon ng problema ang aming mga mayors. So, that is why na Iloilo is one of those LGUs that we requested for a transition so that na mapaplansya namin ang mga implementing executive orders namin. We can level off with the municipalities, the airlines, the shipping lines, at sa mga terminals natin para yung implementation namin anticipated tsaka plansyado siya. So yun lang, that is the reason why USEC June and the President Presby, isa kami sa mga humingi ng transition period kasi may magkakaroon ng medyo chaotic siya if we just say that this is already effective today. So that is all, Mr. President and USEC June. Thank you.
Yeah. Gov, if I may respond.
Go ahead, Yusek Epi.
Gov Toto, if you're an existing executive order requiring RT-PCR for all those who'd like to enter the province of Iloilo, that will be the same protocol that the airlines will use because that's the exception to the general rule, and you've already availed of that exception. What we wanted to be implemented immediately is the non-requirement of the documents, travel authority from the PNP, and the health certificate from the LGU of origin. Those two, marami na hong natuwad, yun pa lang. Again, there was frustration because we gave exception to the testing rule, but so be it. Wala na silang magagawa doon. So if you have an existing executive order requiring RT-PCR for all those traveling to the province of Iloilo, then that will still be imposed by the airline. But at least there will be no securing of a travel authority from the PNP and again, the certificate of health clearance from the origin, LGU of origin. Medyo nakagaan na ho sila doon. So pero pag nagre-require pa rin kayo, wala na magagawa doon ang tao kasi nandun naman talaga sa IATF guideline yun as an exception to the general rule. So in terms of transition, yun lang ang mawawala sa inyo. Hindi ang airline hindi na maghahanap ng travel authority tsaka local health certificate.
Pero yung USEC, yung implementation natin ng provision ng hindi na dapat i-quarantine yung mga returning residents natin, immediately effective din yun.
Yes, immediately effective din yun. Kasi may RT-PCR ka na eh.
Yan ang sabi ko, USEC kung may RT-PCR ka, okay na siya. Except that, halimbawa kami, mahirap kung sabihin natin bukas, hindi na kami magka-quarantine dahil may RT-PCR na. But if you tell that to the airlines today, many flights will be canceled. Tsaka yung mga ships, kasi yung mga tao na may ticket na, wala pa silang RT-PCR. Kasi kahit na nasa EO namin yun, hindi yun in-implement because we were advised. So hindi namin talaga siya na-implement. So kapag biglaan, may problema kami. So yun ang...
So ano pala, Gov, sa inyo is you allow returning residents na walang RT-PCR, but they will be quarantined.
Yes, because we were advised then that yun nga sinabi nila noon, you cannot require RT-PCR. Pero nung sinabi yun, nasa EO na namin yun, but we did not implement that anyway because we were advised against it. So that is why we quarantine. So isa lang sa mga areas na sa tingin namin, kailangan ng transition. Yung isa pa, yung pag-check up sa airport ba? Right now, we have a walk-through temperature detecting equipment sa mga airports and ports namin. But kung i-check up namin talaga sila na parang medical check up sa airport, hindi siya ganun kadali i-implement para sa amin siguro. Especially that ang airports namin, if we fully open up travel, we can have 18 flights or 15 flights a day. Ganun din sa aming mga barko. So isa yun sa mga provision na not immediately ma-implement namin yung pag-check up ng mga symptomatic sa ports at saka sa mga airports namin.
So two things, Gov, can I respond?
Yeah.
One is I would suggest that you issue a transitory executive order for this one. So lagyan nyo ng cut-off. So for those who have already been issued tickets, let's say as of March 4 or March 5, while you not be issuing requiring RT-PCR, they will be quarantined in their homes. Bigyan niyo akong kopya, I'll take the cudgels for it, no? I will defend it. But lagyan niyo lang na cut off. In other words, after March 4 or March 5, mag-require na kayo ng RT-PCR. The other one is yung clinical assessment naman. The clinical assessment team will be organized by the CAAP or by the airlines, but you will be asked to have a representative lang in the health assessment team. So pabayaan nyo na ho lang siguro na muna yung CAAP to organize your health assessment team in your airport sa Iloilo. So yun na lang muna. Pero maganda may representative lang kayo sa team.
Thank you, Yusek. Pero I have to say this in advance, no? Right now, I don't know with the other provinces, our municipalities are preparing a resolution or a position paper requesting for the same thing, no? A reasonable transition. Kasi yun nga with the changes in the rules on RT-PCR test and the quarantine, ma-outbalance sila. Yun nga dahil yung hindi tayo naka-warn sa mga returning residents natin, we will not give them time to adjust. So yun lang. So all our municipalities are preparing the resolutions now that it will be submitted to the National Task Force requesting for the same thing, a transition period to iron out the adjustments that we have to make in order to comply fully with resolution number 101. Yun lang. Thank you very much.
Thank you po.
Thank you, Gob Dodo. Yusek Epi.
Gob, naka-mute kayo, Gob.
There. Okay. I think si Gob Defensor has a good point there. Actually, even in our province, there is a little confusion as to when these things will be effective. And if we have to consider the fact that we have organized the medical teams for every port, airport or seaport, and then the BOQ will have to prepare the facilities for the isolation units, no? At there are radical changes, removal of quarantine, removal of the medical certificate, travel authority, but we see the objective there, no? Pero I think dapat talaga merong reasonable transition period. Alam mo, kanina nagbi-meeting din yung aming provincial task force as to how it can be implemented. Ang daming questions. I don't know. Baka we may have to really come up. Kayo na mag-issue ng medyo sabihin sa IATF. Baka we can have 1 week or 2 weeks. And then you input already and come up with some mandatory guidelines or rules dito sa mga pinasok natin, which are important things. Like, of course, yung antigen test, very important sa amin yan. And yung PCR talagang medyo costly, malabo pa for many provinces. Baka we may have to really request for a reasonable transition period within which we have to prepare ourselves. Ano kaya, Yusek Epi? Baka mahirap talaga oo.
No, I agree and I will support you on the transitional side, no? Although we'll have to go through the IATF and most probably announce it that there's a transition. Ang pakiusap ko lang po yung recognizing the acceptance of a traveler without the travel authority from the PNP and without the health certificate. Yun lang po, kasi doon po sila natuwa. Kasi nahihirapan sila kumuha ng dalawang yon. All others, that's something that is defendable. I'm willing to back you up on that transition on the RT-RPS testing or yung quarantine for returning of your province mates. I will back you up. Doon lang sa dalawang yon. Yun lang pong pakiusap ko that it be made immediately effective. No more PNP travel authority, no more local health certificate from the LG of origin.
Sa akin walang problema ho yun. I don't think the governors will object to that.
Opo,
actually, we support it. May mga objection ba ho dyan sa mga gobernador? Tanggalin na yung travel authority ng police at yung medical certificate from the LG of origin. Meron ba ho anyway, it's already a resolution of the IATF. We have to follow also.
Yun lang pong immediate.
Bata ito. Okay ho siguro. Wala pa nag-o-object Meron ba nag-o-object? Wala naman ho. Basta ho yung travel coordination permit also from the provincial government. Yun lang naman ho hihingin para we monitor also. But initially, we will comply. We will fully support that. Wala ko nag-object eh. We will even announce na we're amenable to that. At saka yung quarantine, yan, tingin ko, talagang gustong-gusto nang tanggalin yung quarantine, no? But we have to find out from the LGUs kung talagang, kasi marami pa naka-quarantine ngayon eh. Baka tama ho yun, transition period of 2 weeks, tapos na ho yung naka-quarantine lahat, and then wala na, release na lahat, wala nang no quarantine. Baka yun, on those 2 points, okay po yun, Yusik Epi, wala ho nag-object, tinanong ko. We will announce, so we are fully supporting that. Opo, Yusik Epi.
And kung magkaroon kayo ng criticism for not enforcing immediately the other provisions, I'll absorb those criticism. Ako nang bahala sa inyo.
Ayan, salamat ho. Maraming salamat. O si Sandy, may mga tanong pa ba? At gabi na.
And then last na lang yung kay Governor Bons Dolor kasi, sana hindi lang po yung ito, Yusek, yung mga prospective issuances din ng IATF, always put a transition period kasi yung may due process ng public information and enough time for the LGU to prepare. Okay.
Yeah,
Siguro
that's a
hindi
good
lang
point.
na-announce yung transition, dapat may transition yun eh.
Yes, always. Kasi hindi yung nabibigla kami na naririnig na lang nila sa TV na in-announce ganito. Parang nagugulat po ang mga LGUs talaga.
Okay na. At may mga ibang ano pa, 6 o'clock already. Governors, may tanong pa ba? Suggestion? Otherwise, pakawalan na ho natin si Yusik Epi, i-blow out natin ito minsan. Talagang pinahihirapan natin mabuti si Yusik Epi. So wala na ho yata, Yusik Epi.
Yes sir, okay na po ako.
Okay na po, maraming salamat po to all the governors, that's po chairman ng LPP, lahat po kayo. Maraming salamat po. We'll meet
Salamat
again,
po.
we'll have another
Governor.
like this, UCKP, we will have
Governor.
another pag meron mga issuances, UCKP, mga ganito
Sa La
online
Union
natin.
po, makisuyo na lang po, pa-Viber na lang po sa akin yung yung proposed EO nila. Pupunta ako diyan sa La Union on Saturday. Huwag niyo akong
Okay.
ha.
Governor Velasco, last na lang po. Andito
Last
pa ako
na.
sa Congress. Sabi ng PCSO, i-defer na raw nila yung STL muna sa Isabela.
Wow, that's good news. Tunalo tayo. Yeah, very good. Good. Sige po, Yusik Epi. Maraming salamat po. And all the gods, keep safe po.
Salamat po.
Bye po. Thank you po.
Ingat po kayo. Ingat po kayo.
Thank you, Yusek
po.
Epi.
Sek, bye-bye, Sek.
Thank you, Director Rowen.
Sek,
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Hey,
Director Roel,
JJ,
Sandy,
ayaw mo
Thank you, thank you.
po.